Hi there and welcome back to another book review. Today we are talking about Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance by Kate Robb. If you're thinking about checking out Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance for yourself, you don't have to worry about spoilers in this video. The first parts of my videos are always spoiler free, so you can see if this book is your cup of tea. After a quick summary and a basic review, I'll give a clear spoiler warning before talking in depth about the stuff that happens in this book. Here are some content warnings for Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance by Kate Robb. Kitty St. Clair is a story told in two parts. First, we have Julia DeMarco living in present day, where she works as an aide at a nursing home, and then we also have her forays into kind of the diary entries of Kitty St. Clair. Kitty St. Clair was a resident living at Sunnyvale, the resident home that Jules works at. At the start of our book, Kitty has already passed away. After Kitty's passing, a couple of things happen. Jules finds her diary and begins to read through it. Jules also discovers that she's been listed as a recipient in Kitty's will, and one of Jules' hookups from a while ago comes back into town, which leaves her with a lot to handle. When Jules reads through Kitty's diary, she's thrust into the past, which gives us a parallel for some of the stuff that Jules is going through in the present. It's through these experiences and her present real-life drama that she faces the age-old question of anyone growing up in a small town. Is it better for her to stay, or is it better for her to go? Before I give you my rating for Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance, let's do a quick run-through of my rating system. 1 star means that I could not finish the book. 2 stars means that I struggled to finish, but I did. 3 stars means it was okay and worth reading. 4 stars means I really liked it and I would recommend it to a friend. And 5 stars, which is my highest honor, means I would read the book again. I gave Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance a 3-star rating because while I enjoyed it, I probably wouldn't recommend it to a friend or read it again. There were a lot of elements to like about this one. The small town setting, the romance, and our character's realistic struggles and considerations for how to go about her future. However, my primary problem with the book is that I felt the namesake, Kitty St. Clair, should have had a little bit more depth to her character and a little bit more relevance in the story. If you read Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance and you liked it and you're looking for some recommendations, I have a couple of books you might also enjoy. The first one is This Spells Love, also by Kate Robb. If you're a fan of Kate Robb's writing, obviously you might like another one of her books. And this one also has kind of a magical realism or kind of time travel-esque vibe to it. This Spells Love explores a woman's choices and how they shape her life, and follows what she might do if she were given the opportunity to make different decisions. If you liked Kitty St. Clair, you might also like The Good Part by Sophie Cousens. This one is a little less heavy on the romance and a little more focused on the overall themes of the book, but I think it addresses a lot of the same themes as Kitty St. Clair. In this one, we see a woman wishing she could just get to the good part of her life already, and when she's thrust forward in the future, having skipped a lot of the important moments, she realizes that life is all about the journey and not necessarily the destination. And finally, I would also recommend A Winter in New York by Josie. This one tells the story of a woman who's moved to New York to try and restart her life, only to discover she's kind of walking in her mother's footsteps. By connecting with the people there, she's able to explore more of her mother's history and is able to kind of dive into themes of family, history, and legacy. We are now entering into the spoiler-filled part of this video. If Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance sounds like your cup of tea, now is a good time to click away, go read it, and then come back so you can see if you agree with my thoughts and opinions on this book. If you like the sound of this book but you don't want to read it yourself, you don't have to worry because I'm going to give you the full rundown. Jules, our main character, is living in Westlake when she meets Reeves one summer. The two of them hit it off, and she ends up opening up to him, telling him that she's applying for med school, something she's told nobody, not even her best friend Zoe. Reeves tells her that he wants to be an artist, and the two of them end up having a one-night stand. Jules thinks they had a great connection. The only problem is she gave him her phone number, but he never got in touch with her again. 2 years later, Jules is attending the funeral of Kitty St. Clair when Reeves comes back to town. Jules and Kitty were somewhat close, with Jules having spent time with her before she passed away. There is a ton of tension between Jules and Reeves, which Zoe definitely picks up on. After a little bit of banter and a spilled drink, Reeves ends up taking off. This is when we learned that Jules never actually ended up applying for med school back then, when she discovered that her mom signed up for a bunch of credit cards in her name, and she probably wouldn't be able to get a loan to pay for school. Right after the funeral, a lawyer gets in touch with Jules to let her know that Kitty has left something to her in the will. This something turns out to be a property, in fact an old dance hall in Westlake. Later, while helping to clean out Kitty's room at Sunnyvale, Jules finds one of her old diaries. She runs into Reeves again at the nursing home and tries to do some online stalking of him. And that night, after reading Kitty's diary for the first time, when she falls asleep, she finds herself decades in the past, in the shoes of Dottie, Kitty's best friend. At this time, Kitty isn't quite Kitty St. Clair yet, as she has her sights set on Beau St. Clair. Beau is rich and could give Kitty the life that she wants. Kitty and Jules, as Dottie, are headed to a dance, but when they get to the dance, Bo is with another girl, and Kitty ends up dancing with a guy named Knots instead. Back in the present day, after her weird dream, Jules goes to the dance hall to kind of poke around and see what she might be inheriting. She runs into Reeves again, and this is when they find out that Jules' number actually got put into his phone incorrectly. Throughout the story, Jules continues to return to little snippets of Kitty's life. During this time, Kitty is trying to decide between Bo and Knots. Bo is rich and decently nice and should be able to give her the life of adventure that she wants, but Knots is more like the love of her life, without having the financial stability to offer her the kind of life she wants. Eventually, Kitty tells Jules, as Dottie, what her decision is. She's gonna stay in town and run the dance hall with Knots, who's planning to buy the property. Back in the present day, knowing that she might have the money after selling the dance hall, Jules goes ahead and applies to med school. Reeves is in town all the time and clearly interested in her. He asks her out to dinner, and they go to a New Year's Eve party together where they share a midnight kiss. At their first official date, Jules admits that she's too nervous to open the email that will tell her whether she's been accepted or rejected to med school. Reeves encourages her to open it, and it turns out that she's been invited to interview. She makes a plan to stay with him while she's in the city for this interview. He also finds out that she's the one who inherited the dance hall and encourages her to get a real estate lawyer so that she can look into selling the place. Reeves works for a company that's interested in buying it so they can turn it into luxury condos. We see more about Jules' relationship with her mother, who has always wanted to leave Westlake and have kind of a big grand life, but has never actually managed to do it. Her mother isn't that attentive and is obviously kind of abusive, seeing as how she's used Jules' name to sign up for these credit cards. Jules is on her way to stay with Reeves for her interview, and Zoe finds out about the whole thing. Jules hasn't told her any of it, not that she applied to med school, not that she got the interview, and not that she's thinking of selling the dance hall so she can get in. Zoe is obviously pretty upset with her about not sharing these things, and Jules leaves upset. When Jules gets to Toronto, Reeves has a really fancy dinner planned for her, and she ends up freaking out a little bit because she doesn't feel prepared to move to Toronto or to be in a place where she doesn't quite feel like she fits in. She ends up going to the bathroom and calls Zoe while she's in there, and the two of them talk it through. When she comes out of the bathroom, Reeves has already given up their table, saying that he realized it wasn't exactly the right move. He says he wants to do a date that she's gonna enjoy and that she's gonna feel comfortable with, and it just makes her like him more. Her interview goes really well, and later while she's out with Reeves and some of his friends, she learns a little bit more about his job situation. If you remember back at the beginning of the book, Reeves had told her originally that he wanted to be an artist, but we learn that he's come into this kind of real estate job, and according to his friends, he'll do anything to keep his boss happy. And that even included taking the daughter of a client to a wedding, just to keep his boss happy. Jules is pretty unsettled by this and asks him point blank if he's interested in her because he wants her to sell the dance hall. Reeves tells her no, of course not, and explains kind of the other stuff that he'd done for his job and going to the wedding with that girl. We learn that rather than being an artist like he wanted to, he's taken this job to make his dad happy. The next day at brunch, the family kind of pokes fun at him, with one of the brothers being a doctor and the other one being a lawyer, and all of them kind of thinking of him as being the least successful one. Reeves has asked Jules to come back to Toronto for his parents' anniversary dinner, and she tells him that she's gonna see if she can get work off. At first she says that she can't, but then when her shifts are moved around, she's able to show up kind of last minute. Reeves is acting kind of strange, and then at the anniversary dinner, his boss reveals that they're planning to not only buy the dance hall, but to also buy the building across the street, which is Sunnyvale, the retirement home that Jules loves and has worked at for a long time. Jules feels betrayed and ends up leaving Toronto, trying to drive back to Westlake. Her car breaks down, and it's actually her mom who comes to get her, so Jules ends up staying the night with her mom, and the two of them kind of talk through their relationship. Meanwhile, back in Kitty's time, we find out that Kitty actually isn't going to be choosing Knots, and since Knots won't be able to buy the dance hall like he wants to, Kitty ends up going with Bo St. Clair instead. Jules gets back to Westlake, and Reeves is desperately trying to get in touch with her. Reeves even appeals to Zoe, just trying to get in touch with Jules to tell her that his boss won't buy Sunnyvale if he can't also get the dance hall at the same time. When Reeves shows up at Sunnyvale, Jules avoids him. Meanwhile, Jules discovers that a Mr. McNaught, who has been at Sunnyvale the whole time, is actually Knots from Kitty's diary. Even though Kitty didn't end up marrying Knots all those years ago, Jules is relieved that she at least got to spend the last part of her life with the man she really loved. Mr. McNaught also tells Jules the real reason that Kitty ended up going with Bo St. Clair, so she could make sure Knots was able to buy the dance hall. Reeves apologizes to Jules and reveals that he had no idea about Sunnyvale being a part of it, not up until the morning morning of his parents' anniversary dinner. He was trying to fix things before Jules could find out about it. After making up, they find a different solution. Reeves is able to connect Jules with one of his artsy friends who rents out the dance hall instead of her having to sell it. She's able to defer med school a year and use the money from renting out the dance hall to pay for it. The story ends in our epilogue with Zoe pregnant and Jules in her first year of med school. They are having a little celebration. Reeves and Jules' relationship is going great, and at the party, a mysterious bottle of liquor, one that Kitty really enjoyed, appears with a note telling Jules to enjoy it. Alright, so now that you know what happens in Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance, we can get into some of my thoughts and opinions on this book. The first thing I liked about it was the great setting around Westlake, making it feel like a very cozy, relatable small town. I appreciated how the different settings kind of came together to paint a picture of Westlake, like Lou's Diner, Sunnyvale, the Legion, and even the lake. I may also be a little bit biased, but I used to work at a nursing home, so I really enjoyed the parts of the story that showed Jules working there and connecting with the residents, since when I used to work in a nursing home, I always thought of it as a place that was just full of stories. Obviously, Jules working at Sunnyvale makes a lot of sense since this is where she met and had a relationship with Kitty. But my only caveat to that is that I just wish that there had been more of Jules and Kitty. The book starts with Kitty having passed away already, and even the flashbacks we get kind of show her as being a little bit one-dimensional and a little bit of like a party girl caricature. I think it was a lot of fun to make her so boisterous and loud, but I would have appreciated a lot more of the human moments to kind of balance that out. I really liked the structure of the parallel timelines between Jules' present day and Kitty in the past. I felt that the present day part of the story was paid a lot more attention to than the past, and I also almost wish that Kitty's diary entries had either been left one way or the other, because we would read the diary entries and then kind of go back into the past, and I felt that we didn't really need both. Like, we could have either just had the diary entries and fleshed them out and made them a little bit more interesting to read, or we could have just had, you know, she reads the diary and then we get to see her in the past. I think part of it is that I was just expecting Jules' trips to the past to have a little bit more of an impact on the present. Sometimes they almost felt as just kind of like an afterthought. For a second, I thought that the whole point of this was that Jules might need to convince Kitty to go for Not instead of Beau St. Clair, so she could have her happy ending with real love, but it would mean Jules sacrificing the dance hall in the present day. Obviously, the story didn't need to go in that direction to be good, but I think that that's just evidence of how I was wishing for the diary entries and for Jules' participation in these little like magical realism moments to be a little bit more impactful on the present day. What it really comes down to, I think, is that no matter what, I just wish Kitty had been a little bit of a stronger and more well-rounded character, especially considering the weight that she has in this story. Additionally, I wanted more around Jules' relationship with her mom and with Zoe, since it feels like the kind of conflicts between them were brushed over quickly and then resolved just as quickly. With Zoe, I kind of wanted to see more than just a surface level relationship between the two of them. We're told that they're best friends and we see that they talk, but later on in the book, when Zoe is mad at Jules for pulling away from her, I'd never really seen evidence that they had ever really talked about those things to begin with, or that Jules had ever been forthcoming with that information. So it just didn't feel as impactful as I think it could have if we had actually seen Jules connecting to Zoe as like a real best friend. All in all, I did enjoy Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance, and that's why I gave it a 3-star rating. I thought it was a perfectly decent kind of time travel magical realism-esque romance. You might like this one if you're into the kind of small town setting and a tight-knit cast of characters who all interact in these local settings. If there's a book you'd like me to review in the future, just drop me a comment and let me know. Thanks so much for watching.